Now, if you don't know what ambiguity is, I'm going to tell you. It's the quality, ability to interpret something more way than one that's spoken or written. In fact, in Christianity, it's a ton of things. There's a ton of ambiguity. Ambiguity shouldn't be allowed. But since Jesus talked in metaphor, apparently it gave the apostles license to do the same, which means ambiguity on steroids, confusion, and all kinds of weird stuff. What is your defense against all that? I don't know what yours is, but mine is dividing rightly by two things. One is corroboration. When something corroborates from one person to another or book to another, it's just like gold. Corroborated scripture is like gold. And what's the other one? This. Uh-oh. My staff is sleeping on the job. What did Jesus say? See, this is how you fight ambiguity. Look for corroboration, and this pot of gold right here. They call him the chief cornerstone. Unfortunately, too many Christians don't. They get married to Paul. They think somehow the death and resurrection to Jesus somehow changes his words. And now you got to be married to Paul. Well, sit down, grasshopper. Paul, bless his mortal heart, is not the way, truth, and life. Even though he's ordained, even though he's blessed, and even though he got a lot of stuff right, Paul could be the reason. Paul could be the reason for all the ambiguity, or most of it. And I'm going to go into it with just 4 examples. You could, tell me your own in the comment section. You tell me the places you see where there's ambiguity, confusion. You could interpret it differently. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 18. What does Paul say there? He likens dead souls to sleeping souls awaiting the resurrection. Thus, a whole swath of Christianity buys what's called soul sleep doctrine or whatever that is. Is what Paul said corroborated? No. Is what Paul said what Jesus said? No. Jesus said that nobody gets saved until a resurrection. And souls aren't sleeping. They're dead. The soul is mortal. See, Paul Paul does stuff in zeal. Here's the way I look at it. He contradicts, but I don't think he's doing it deliberately. Yet he still got canonized for the things he did that's right. Like, for instance, Acts 28, verse 31, at the very end of Acts. It's Paul living where he's living, doing the gospel, exactly like Jesus. The kingdom first and matters concerning Jesus secondary, just like you should be doing. See, I'm on Paul now. So I just see the soul sleep. What the? You get the malleable reading that without corroboration. They're going to go buying it as if the soul is sleeping. The soul is mortal. From the very beginning of the Bible, the soul is mortal, not immortal. And not sleeping. not sleeping, waiting for the resurrection. Okay, what's another one Paul does? Somewhere, you look this one up yourself. Somewhere Paul says, today is the day of salvation. You see, he's out and out contradicting Jesus, but it's in zeal. So I personally let it go. It's actual contradiction. Because was that day the day of salvation? No. Is today the day of salvation? No. Was it corroborated by anything else? Him saying today is the day? No. And what again? What did Jesus say? Last day. And there goes Paul, throwing a bunch of ambiguity bombs. I'm going to give you 2 more. Give me some if you got any. But this is the thing about Paul. I don't even know where he said this, but I know he said it. I don't remember. Because you know, I've got most scripture memorized. He says the gospel was preached to all creatures. Did anybody else ever say that? No. Is it corroborated by any other scripture? No. He said the gospel was preached to all creatures. You know, I mean, it's only supposed to be preached to all nations. Okay, or all the world, so I guess creatures, world. You see what's happening here? The gospel has not been preached to all creatures, or all world, or all nations. Why? Let's try to make common sense out of this. If the gospel was preached to all nations, the end would come. Christ would come and establish his kingdom like 1 Corinthians 15:24. The eschatology of the gospel. And Paul got that right. He didn't get it right when, but nobody's got it right when. He sure got the eschatology of it right, though. The gospel being fulfilled, the kingdom being delivered up, the end, all the things out of Matthew 24:14. It's amazing. And then he goes saying, gospel was preached to all creatures. But you know what? The preterists, they go and buy that. They actually think Jesus returned in what, 70 A.D.? And established the kingdom. It was the quietest establishment in the kingdom I ever heard of. Put all his enemies under his foot. You know, yet somehow poverty and politicians are still running the place. Yeah. My goodness. I just gave you 3 things. Paul, ambiguity bombs. Paul just dropped. Contradictions, but not on deliberate purpose. And this last one I've got that really gets me angry. It gets me angry because it's an out-and-out contradiction to Jesus. But I let it go because I divide rightly. Because it always goes back to this. What did Jesus say? Let Paul rave. He's not the truth. You have to balance, measure what he says by this guy. Paul says, you have been saved. Somewhere he says. I should have noted where it is in Scripture. And I'm sure it's in one of the Corinthians or something. You have been saved. Jesus says last day. Paul says you already been. What segment of Christianity buys what Paul says? The vast majority. All of a sudden what Jesus says on the matter about last day and enduring to the end. No, Paul says we've been saved. And what's the satanic result of that? Of believing you're already saved. The gospel no longer has any importance. If you're saved already, you ain't got to bother with the gospel that's supposed to go to the world. So you got to connect these things. Now, Paul is dropping ambiguity bombs all the time. That's why you always divide rightly by corroboration. And what did Jesus say about it? You know, Paul is ordained and all the good stuff and was totally on point on so many things. But why was he ambiguous about others? Because he was a zealot, overcome with zeal, and lied in zeal, but not on purpose. That's my only answer to that. Because if you go by and Paul is the truth, even though it's uncorroborated, the things I just mentioned, guess who owns your soul? The Prince of the Air. You go believe in Paul at all without measuring against Jesus. You're owned. You're owned by Satan. And that's all I had to say about this. Now, if you know of any other ambiguity bombs on Paul's part, give it to us. God bless you.